Hello, 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 and welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to U.S. politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective. My name is Clemencia Herrera, and I am the founder of Moira Studio, an advertising agency that works on political advocacy and campaigns that target Latinx. Hello.
Hola, Clem.
Hola, querida.
And I am
¿Cómo
Cecilia
estás?
del CID, Environmental and Social Justice Practitioner, Latin American, immigrant from Guatemala, community weaver, and working on media.
Yes, and today we have Adrian Reina Chaboya once again. Welcome back, Adrian.
Oh, bienvenido.
Thank you again for joining us. Adrian is a queer civil rights strategist and partner at New Currents Collective. He is an immigrant from Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Grew up undocumented in Texas, and there he spent 10 years organizing with immigrant communities at United We Dream, the largest immigrant youth-led organization in the country, and now lives in Seattle, Washington. And once again, we're super excited to have you here today and take a deep dive into another very, very important subject.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Yes, so today's subject is something that all of us in communication and anyone that works in politics has been battling for some time. And this is the effects of disinformation on social media and online platforms. The fact that now information dissemination is in the hands of everyone through social media is great, but it also means that a massive amount of disinformation is going on. Manipulating the public opinion through junk news, bots that amplify opinions, trolls that are harassing people to suppress their free speech, also strategic data leaks that target political campaigns, anybody, emails, and a lack of transparency on behalf of social media platforms, how they censor stuff, what they're looking for. It's making things very difficult for everyone, right?
Yeah, certainly.
So let's take a deep dive into this, and I think maybe for comparison, maybe let's talk for like a minute. What is it that we, at least what me in this agency and what we do, and with our team and with our clients, what we do, which is like we try to be as ethical as possible when we're gathering our information and we're making it public. Maybe for comparison, we can talk about that. And Adrian, please chime in anytime. So we actually, one of the things that we do whenever we're working with a candidate is we hire a research team. We don't hire it. The campaign hires it, and we work along with them. And so every single thing that we want to say, the messaging or the topics that we are trying to highlight from our candidate or against the other candidate, are double and triple checked against news article, against the FCC, how they're funded, how much money has come to fund some sort of advertising, or how much money has been funding an organization, or how much money the candidates are making off of any lobbying or anything like that. This is all double and triple checked. And then once we actually write scripts and then the ad is finished, that is sent out to lawyers. And the lawyers then check once again if the language is appropriate, if we are exaggerating, if we are overstepping on anything. And they actually ask us, give us the research. They want to, look, one thing against the other. So it goes through a lot of checks and balances before anything goes out. And because this is like legal stuff. There could be lawsuits going on if the information is false. Then, how is it that there's just so much stuff out there that is absolutely not true? very much exaggerated, and it's kind of like it goes out with impunity. So I don't know. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, look, let's just cut straight to the chase. Disinformation, misinformation is not new. You know, like I remember my parents, que la prensa amarillista, you know, like all that, like that. We know that there's always actors that are trying to manipulate what is in front, what we're talking about through like conspiracism, escándalo, you know, just like that's not new. What's new in this decade is that disinformation and misinformation has become so profitable for social media companies. Why? Because disinformation spreads because it's the kind of thing that you read and you're like, like it just like creates that
it's
visceral
the kind of thing that
reaction.
makes people want to come back.
Cheese me.
Sí.
Let me give it to everyone.
Oh, let me send it. Déjaselo mando a mi tía. Let me send it to everybody. You know, like, and it keeps people clicking. It keeps people scrolling. It keeps people commenting. Which means what? More time people are on for these companies to have more ability to market more things. So the entire business model in which the internet companies have built this entire infrastructure is driving an information crisis that we're feeling it today, where there are folks who like know how to capitalize from dog whistling, from racism even within our communities, to spread like false information that then keeps people. It's not about like disinformation isn't so much about like trying to convince people of like something that's not true. I mean, yes, some people fall for that because and we can talk about the cognitive reasons of why that is, but it ultimately keeps like eventually it rises to the level where we're all talking about it, where we're all talking about Hillary Clinton's emails, when we're all talking about the whether the vaccine is safe or not, right? Like introduce enough doubt and you begin to actually have conversations that are like whether or not voting matters, right? Like, and you know, it begs a question of like, are we doing enough to saturate the information ecosystem with good information?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that, I think you have called it out, like propaganda for political purposes is something that it has happened. Like there's a lot of research, academic research done on it. It was used to some of the most authoritarian, regimes in the world. The Nazis had like a whole propagandist like that drove messaging is specifically to justify one of the biggest like genocides, the Holocaust, and historically there is like a person that designed these strategies and gave talking points. And I think you and I have, Clemencia, talked about a little bit. And my question always to you is like, why is it that it feels like one side of the spectrum is much better at driving their messaging very succinctly, finding very simple kind of nuggets, and the other ones, even though they might have policies that benefit our communities or communities that have been disenfranchised, don't usually seem to be as effective at just delivering that like unclear understanding so that people know like, no, I'm going to call my senator, I'm going to find out what I need to do to support that bill because it will impact my family directly. And it never seems to have that clarity, that groundness. And so we know that this information, like these campaigns, are historically being used politically to great detriment of humanity. And then now they have these massive machinery of, artificial intelligence and like all these like algorithms that give you a bubble. And like if you click on something, it's not only that we can capitalize on what we are the product. Like if you're not I saw this thing like if you are not paying for social media, then you are being sold in social media. Your clicks are sold. So now we are the product, and so when you click on something, the algorithm immediately learns and gives you something similar, right? And before you know it, when this, I remember when, I'm going to say from like some of the social media channels first started, it was your friends, and you saw it didn't matter what your friends posted, you will see it. So, and now I don't see many of the news from my friends, which is the reason that I was in there to begin with, right? To be connected with my family abroad, to my friends abroad, to my family, to my friends from college. I'm not there anymore. I see a lot of other things. And very rarely, unless I go looking for them, do I see what my network, my friends, my community is posting. So I think that we're being consumed, and we're being in these circles of like
we live in silos.
Yes, and that is danger because the system was supposed to have some checks and balances like you have in outside of the virtual world, and those moderators, that investment in moderation is not done. And like the recent leaks on Facebook have demonstrated how they have not invested in the way they needed to do, specifically, and this is important for our community because we're not English speakers.
Or it could be, like you said in the last episode, maybe the system is working exactly how it's supposed to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the moderator was intentionally left aside or left, not very as powerful as it could be or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like...
And the United States has regulations. So, of course, then they will spend money moderating the English-speaking content. But when you are operating in countries that don't have strong regulations like Europeans or United States country does, then the system is designed to drive what will allow you to extract the most amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And power.
And like that point you're bringing, Cecilia, about it begs a question, like if there's any like activists listening to this, right? Like what responsibility do we have as advocates in the US to the global South of a US based company's activities, the impact that it's had on the democratic and like just overall social instability that this like unhinged, because think about Brazil, right? Like WhatsApp is basically a public utility. Like people can't, like everyone uses WhatsApp for everything, and yet it's owned by a private US based company, right? That is just like crossing their arms, like pretending like mass amounts of COVID disinformation and like election disinformation isn't happening there. Yeah. They have zero accountability to the public, despite the fact that like it runs on that application. That is frightening. So what responsibility do we have here in the US to hold these companies accountable, not only to the damage that they're doing here, but the damage that they have already done and profited from?
And I think it's important to kind of like consider that that is intentional. Like there's these new leaks that were about the Facebook company and way of operating demonstrate that they have successfully been a tool of authoritarianism across, and like Myanmar is one of the places that was named, Brazil, Ethiopia, and places that already have, the United States is a very old democracy, if we want to, democracy, but Brazil is a very new democracy, maybe 3 decades. We were in a dictatorship, like when I think of Guatemala is a very new democracy, 1996, 1986, I'm sorry. So that is only, 30 years ago. And so when we compare, I don't know, 100 years plus of democratic practice or like exercise, plus these places where there is very fragile, not having moderation. And also, Adrienne, what you're saying is really true. All of these tools, social media, platforms are like a utility. They help to communicate like your old phone company used to be.
Yep.
This is what you use. So they are not regulated like your phone company is and has to have our phone companies cannot hand over our information who's call you unless a judge orders you to someone to hand it over. They don't have those regulations. And also it wasn't part of this conglomerate before, and now we have to think about how do we break it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly it. While we are so tied to all these checks and balances, and this, I think this has to do with, the issue with the messaging. We're so tied to the checks and balances and trying to be ethical about it that our messaging is not as sensationalist and chisme-like as the other, as the misinformation campaigns, because it's like, we can't just get someone that looks like, okay, let's get a doctor that looks really good and is a great actor to tell all these amazing things about how the vaccine works, because doctors are not actors. And so it's impossible to get a doctor that is like, really good at, or like immunologist that's really good at, on camera and explaining something, whereas like, and the misinformation campaign can totally just get an actor, put a white, bata on them or a lab coat or whatever, and just have them say whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're believable.
Right.
And so it's like, we are so tied with our checks and balances. And I'm not saying this is bad, being tied to checks and balances, but this is where, I'm thinking about like, why aren't they accountable? Why aren't they being held accountable? Because we are certainly being held accountable. We are certainly, tied to, trying to do this ethical way, communicating ethically in like avoiding lawsuits and things like that. Like, why is there so much impunity in this?
I think it got shifted a little bit. Like, you have an organization, right? You have Moira Studios. If there is an error in the way messaging is delivered, someone clearly to go after. But when we are transmitting, and I am suddenly, I get up on YouTube or another, Facebook, and I start transmitting live and said, I'm a doctor and this is what I think. Mm-hmm. And I have been I've received, like, my family has shared stuff with me from Latin America when I am like a simple search of some of these bullet points. In fact, there's just a simple search on the internet saying,
well, I mean,
just verbatim, and then it says this has been fact checked and proved wrong. Like, this is going around on the internet and it had been like debunked. And when I tell people, like, we have to be careful because with our desire to keep ourselves informed, have become agents of disinformation ourselves. Because the more you take that nugget and share it with your network and send it in your group chat or WhatsApp to all your classmates and your primos and the familia, group and your coworkers group, before you know it, that makes it in the algorithm, that system that replicates it, much more viable. Yeah. And I think I've heard a lot about people saying, like, oh, I did my research. I don't as a biologist, I take a lot of offense on that. Yeah. Because it takes a lot to do research. There's a lot of nights that I did not sleep putting that reference, that citation list,
Yeah. And that's it. And to your point, this is the number one issue with disinformation campaigns. People are not going to fact check it. People don't have the time. I mean, they're looking at this video and they're like at work, or they're in their metro on their way to work, or they're like carrying their baby and they're like whatever. Like they're busy doing their thing and they watch this video and then they're not gonna go, oh, let me see if this is real. Because like I know, because I work in communications, when my family sends me things, I immediately fact check it. And I look up the name of this doctor, quote unquote, and I look up what they say. And if I don't find them, I say, I can't find the name of this doctor, so I can't solidify this theory. And so it's like 99% of people don't fact check what they get online or what they see online. In this whole research, I mean, yesterday I was just looking at this, I don't know if it was on, where was it, but it was somewhere. It's like 40 times that people were made to look like, you know, like dumb butts. And it was basically, somebody said, you need to do your research. And they were like, well, I have a PhD in immunology. I don't know how much more research do you want me to do? You know, this kind of things. And it's like, yeah, the research is like they quickly Googled something and then they found some sort of fringe news blog. And it's like, I think it also, you know, there's also a big issue, which is that the mistrust of media. Mm-hmm. And it's like right now, and especially the last administration did a huge campaign, you know, against the regular media, you know, the regular places where we get our news and we get our information. Those guys are not to be trusted. And so then there was the surge of this fringe media that, or like blogs or like podcasts that just say whatever it is without fact checking, and people are like, I'm gonna trust that more because I can't trust, you know, X, Y, and Z media company. And we're having, then it's just like, who do we trust? And this is really scary to people because, you know, people that just don't have the time to look up stuff or like to read peer-reviewed articles and things like that, they're just like, I don't know who to trust.
Well, I kind of want to like push back a little bit on some of this, and like mostly just to like offer up like a different, like a perspective on this, is that so I think that there is like this idea that this like principle idea of like, are people gullible? Like, are we just gonna believe whatever we hear? And I want to challenge us to think about it from the perspective of like, actually, no, people are not gullible. The thing is that like we have certain like fact checking mechanisms, right? Like someone could tell me that like, oh, you know, that restaurant, that Scottish restaurant is really good. I don't know what Scottish food is, right? Like I have never had, I'm like making this up, no offense, right? I can be like, oh, okay, sure, right? Or if I've had a bad experience with Scottish food before, right? Then I can be like, I don't think that's true, right? So we like check with our prior kind of like idea or like perception of something, right? And so I think that disinformation actors are really good about identifying, well, what are the things that like people already believe that we can like cling on to intentionally manipulate how they perceive a certain issue. And so an example of that, for example, and it's just crazy because I personally struggle with this with my family. If they're listening, hello, you know, I am going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it, you know. But like, here's the thing, right? That like they, so when the George Floyd like protests were happening, I don't know if y'all remember the case of Vanessa Guillen, right? Like the private member of the military who she was like found dead, and yeah, exactly. And it was like a very, it's an act of like real injustice, right? And and I know that many in the community felt that. But folks who like working the disinformation space started to see all this like random content coming out of like, how come no one is like protesting and looting for Vanessa Guillen the same way that people are showing up for George Floyd? It's because, and it was like trying, that was an attempt at like wedging what, you know, often is this like Black versus Latinx and like brown communities tensions. And so what I'm trying to get at with this is that like if someone sees that content online, right, like it's easy to sort of like jump on it and like affirm prior beliefs, right? Like we know that there's a degree of anti-Blackness among like brown Latinx communities. That's like that's a fact, right? Like that's not, we don't have to like be nuanced about it. That exists. Right, and it like plays into that. So there is a degree of like, in order to combat that, right, like people do need a chance, and we actually should encourage people to like, actually, if you ever have an instinct of like you get upset or like have an emotional reaction to something that you're seeing on the internet, actually, you do have the responsibility to fact check that. Like, you have the responsibility to go look at it, even if you don't have the time. We are just living in a day and age where, like, I don't see the regulatory or, like, frankly, the political will and the political conditions existing that will address this from a regulatory standpoint in a real, meaningful way anytime soon. So we have the responsibility to our communities to say, like, you should be fact checking this stuff. Like, and we need to make it easier. And what that means is that, like, the sources of information that our community has, like Univision needs to be divesting from whatever the hell they're like. I'm sorry, no shade to Univision, but like they gotta get their shit together. Like they have to be doing quality reporting. Same thing to Telemundo. And it's unfortunate that like the business models of these social media platforms have basically squeezed like local press, like Spanish speaking local press out of business, because now you have like so and so with the influencer reach more than the newspaper could have kept up with, right? So like we have a responsibility to push electeds to like help fund like principled, good local journalism, right? Like we need to encourage people to like find information, and we need to push search engines to like make sure to deprioritize content that shows up in like search engines of like, you know, it's easy to find. Like they know which internet or web presences are actually not reliable. Like they know. Like we just stop like pretending like you don't.
Whenever you have a website, your SEO or your ranking, whenever you search for something, the ranking is basically how many websites are connected to it. And it's like, and Google has a tool to check that. Now, you could trick it by like going in and connecting a bunch of fake websites or like, you know, empty websites to it and try to trick it. But then Google, I mean, I know because like we have other agencies' website and I get notifications about that. Google says that they have tools to combat that. So it's like,
wow.
I mean, if Google has algorithms to do like this and that and follow you around for all these things, Google has the tool to make sure that some websites that are giving misinformation are there and they don't come up on the rankings.
That's
so it's like what? Follow the money? Is that what we need to do?
I was going to say that. I was going to say we have to always remember, and I think that we should always follow the money. I think there is justifiable disbelief of some, I would call them corporate media outlets, because they stopped doing like investigative journalism or critical journalism a long time ago, right? They are corporately sponsored. They report on other people's reporting.
They're partisan also.
Yes, and they're partisan and they report on other people's reporting. So maybe we can talk about a little bit of when we say fact checking, like these are some of the things when I tell my parents, my dad. Sorry, Dad.
Yeah.
But it's like, we have to fact check it, and he's like, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, it's very simple. Disinformation there is an author that is clearly attached to an organization. So you can go and say, oh, this is an academic organization, this is a news outlet, this is like a hospital or research institution. So when you are putting your name behind a content piece, an Instagram post, a TikTok post, a Facebook post, you're taking that accountability. Like if you say something there that then is incorrect, you can make an amendment. You can say, sorry, this is what I thought. It's your name. But when you have a post that is being shared around and it has no author, it doesn't tell you where it's coming from. So if it does have an author, do like what Clemencia you said, do a quick search of who is this person who is posting this piece of content. And if that person doesn't come up right away, or if this person or if multiple person comes and none of them come up, like you will not take your car, which a lot of us understand, to to your doctor. You will not take your car have an oil change by your doctor
or a place that doesn't have a website. Hola, chiques. So we were so involved in our conversation that we went way over the time. So we're going to leave it right here. And please stay tuned for next episode next week, in which we're going to continue talking about how this information is affecting our community. So see you next week. And watch us on YouTube, Latinx YC Pod, and Twitter and Instagram. See you next week.
Hasta la próxima.